As of May 2, 2024, the situation of the armed forces of Ukraine continues to deteriorate rapidly along the entire line of combat contact. At the same time, it is worth noting that the particularly deplorable state of the Ukrainian army is observed in the Avdiivka direction of the front. This fact is recognized even by Ukrainian sources along with pro-government Telegram channels. According to them, Russian troops have significantly advanced south of Solovyovo and almost came close to the village of Novopokrovskoye. Simultaneously with this, the Russian army continues to develop its offensive to the northwest of Okrytino. So, on May 2, 2024, it became known that Russian troops not only managed to come close to the village of Novoalexandrovka, but also to establish full control over the village of Arkhangelskoye, where units of the armed forces of Ukraine had previously retreated from villages such as Keramika and Novokolinovo. At the same time, it is worth noting that Ukrainian sources also recognize the fact that the Russian army also managed to enter the village of Arkhangelskoye. According to them, the Russian army took control of 80% of the territory, while the remaining 20% moved into the so-called gray zone. A well-known German Russophobe and journalist of the publication Bild, Julian Ropke, was also forced to acknowledge the successes of the Russian army on the battlefield. According to him, Russian troops are advancing on the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine from two directions at once, from Keramik and Okrytino. The German journalist regretfully admitted that despite the fierce resistance of the armed forces of Ukraine, the advance of Russian troops in this sector of the front remains quite high. According to him, every week, the Russian army manages to advance 2-3 kilometers deep into enemy territory. Against this background, independent Ukrainian Telegram channels and military experts began calling President Zelensky an outright liar. In particular, President Zelensky was reminded that on April 5, 2024, he brazenly lied when he officially stated that the offensive of the Russian army had been stopped west of Avdiivka. However, you should understand that is not all that simple, as it might seem at first glance. Zelensky spoke about stopping the offensive of the Russian army in the Avdiivka direction of the front for a reason. As it turned out, all statements by Western and Ukrainian media about the lack of the Ukrainian army's defensive lines west of Avdiivka turned out to be disinformation. As it turned out, the Ukrainian armed forces had created 4 powerful defense lines west of Avdiivka, and Zelensky was sure that Russian troops would be stuck in this sector of the front for a long time. That is why, in early April, President Zelensky, in all seriousness, stated that the advance of the Russian army had been stopped in the Avdiivka direction of the front. However, as time has shown, Russian troops not only broke through these lines of defense of the armed forces of Ukraine, but also significantly increased the number of occupied territories in the Avdiivka direction of the front. Trying to figure out the reason for the success of the Russian army on the battlefield, American experts from the Institute for the Study of War spoke with a high-ranking officer of the armed forces of Ukraine, who told the Americans that the Russians had begun to apply new offensive tactics quite successfully. According to him, the engineering corps of the Russian army began to take an active part in the offensive actions of the Russian troops in all directions of the line of combat contact. And these actions have already yielded results. In particular, after the Russian troops capture new positions, the engineering corps of the Russian army immediately proceed to build the so-called Surovikin lines along the flanks of the newly captured territories. And it is this fact that does not allow the armed forces of Ukraine to attack the flanks of the Russian forces and regain the lost territories. At the end of his conversation with American military experts, the Ukrainian officer admitted that without the presence of combat aviation, it is practically impossible to solve the problem with the new tactic of Russian troops, and that the Russians would continue to use this rather successful offensive tactic in all directions of the line of combat contact. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation officially announced that in the Kherson direction of the front, soldiers of the Russian group under the designation Dnepr eliminated the Special Forces group of the Ukrainian army. In particular, the head of the press center of the group of Russian troops under the designation Dnepr, Roman Kadryan, said that on May 1st, a Ukrainian Special Forces group consisting of 10 people landed on one of the islands in the delta of the Dnieper River, in the Kherson region. However, Russian reconnaissance drones spotted the enemy in time. And, in order to eliminate the Ukrainian Special Forces Group, Marines of the Northern Fleet of the Russian Federation were sent to this area. It is reported that as a result of a brief fight, all the fighters of the Ukrainian Special Forces Group were completely destroyed. According to the Russian side, all the destroyed fighters of the Ukrainian Special Forces Group received military training in Britain. Moreover, it is reported that it is the British Special Services that are leading the landing of Ukrainian sabotage groups in the Kherson region.